So today I wanted to share my story of how I received my diagnosis regarding chronic illness. Growing up, I was pretty much the average kid, a high school athlete. I loved to skateboard. I was very active. I was always out and about after school. I'd go out with my buddies and I wouldn't come home till the streetlights came on. After graduating high school, I started going to college. I soon realized it's not really what I want to do, and actually found my way into a tattoo apprenticeship and body piercing and whatnot, and I was fortunate enough that after a couple years of that I was able to open up my own shop. Around the age of 23, I met a woman who is now my wife. We got married and things were just going great. I couldn't picture a better life, and I was just looking forward to the future. I had a great business. We had just gotten our first home, and things were looking on the up and up. And then right after our 1-year anniversary, I started to get sick. I felt like really fluish, but it wasn't anything like I had ever felt before. I had never had any health issues, major health issues as a kid, other than, basic cold, flu, maybe the occasional strep throat, something like that, but nothing major, nothing ever concerning. And everything just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'll never forget, after our 1-year anniversary, my back had went out, and I was in bed for about a month. And I couldn't barely walk. It ended up being something called splinting of the spine, but that month really freaked me out. I had never had anything like that, and I still to this day don't know what caused it. After that, I was never the same. Something just kind of switched in me. I always felt kind of fluish, but not with the flu, if that makes sense. And then right before Christmas 2011, about 1 in the morning, my heart was just beating out of my chest. I was shaking all over. I felt like I had been hit by a truck. My body ached. I was, vomiting profusely, sweating profusely, and immediately my wife rushed me to the emergency room. I thought I was having a heart attack. I got out of the car, vomited all over the parking lot, and then miraculously felt a little better. And I've never liked hospitals, so I asked my wife if she could take me home, and told her, if this happens again, I'll go to the ER. A couple days went by. I was kind of staying home from work now because I just wasn't feeling right. And I remember I had just eaten some soup, and I was laying in bed, and I went up to go use the bathroom, and I started to pass out, and my heart was just beating out of my chest and would not stop. And so my wife was at work. I ended up calling my mother, who rushed me to the emergency room, and I'll never forget, immediately after taking my vitals, they rushed me into a room and ripped off my shirt, and I was terrified. I thought, this is the end. I'm having, a major heart attack. They gave me, a cocktail, and they got my heart rate to come down, but they couldn't explain it. They couldn't explain what had happened, and they just pretty much dismissed it as a panic attack. From this point on, my health continued to decrease. I was unable to eat. I was unable to sleep. When I would sleep, it'd only be for a couple hours at a time. My sleep schedule was completely messed up. I was unable to work. Either fainting or passing out, or extremely lightheaded. I was extremely achy all over. I just fatigued all the time, and I was pretty much just bedridden constantly. Within a month, I had lost about 40 pounds. I was going to the ER probably 2 to 4 times a week, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, and half the time they wouldn't even try. I think at first they would think that I was on drugs, or that I was just having a panic attack, or I was just crazy, because they couldn't find anything wrong with me. Finally, I was fortunate enough to have a EKG that came back abnormal, and upon further investigation, I was diagnosed with sinus tachycardia. that wasn't, the end of it, but at least I had some kind of diagnosis, because I thought I was going insane. I legitimately thought that I was losing my mind because I had all these symptoms that were very real, but I was being, dismissed every time. And at this point, I had heard everything from it's anxiety to indigestion to a possible tumor on my adrenal gland to a thyroid issue. I had heard every excuse under the sun, or every theory under the sun, but nothing to substantiate these theories. And they weren't running, very extensive tests. I would just get like a basic, CBC, which is a comprehensive blood count, EKG, maybe the occasional X-ray. I think at this point maybe I had like one CT scan. They pretty much were just dismissing me all the time. I was crazy to them. So finally, with this diagnosis of this tachycardia, I was given a referral to a cardiologist, but I wasn't able to see this cardiologist for 6 months because it was a new patient consultation, and they were super backed up. And so I had started to do my own research because I was still constantly going to the ER thinking that I'm having a heart attack or thinking I'm dying. I'm malnourished, I'm fatigued, I'm sicker than ever, and this, kept progressively getting worse. And I'll never forget, almost immediately after Googling my symptoms, I came across this video on YouTube of this young woman, and she might as well have been speaking directly to me or speaking about my symptoms. And I just, remember this overwhelming feeling of emotion, like a blanket, just come over me. And I knew within an instant that this is what I had. And I called my wife into the room and asked her to watch the video, and immediately she started just bawling her eyes out because she knew that this is what I had. And I looked at her face and I told her immediately, I understand if you want to leave, if you want to divorce or separate, because this isn't fair, because, this is debilitating. This doesn't seem like it's going to go away or get better. So, I understand. And to this day, if she walked out this minute or the next minute, tomorrow, next week, I would completely understand, and I would hold no grudges, because living with somebody, especially being married to somebody with chronic illness, is extremely difficult, and I commend anybody that does it. So finally I had this appointment with this cardiologist who, I was told if there's anything wrong with you, he'll figure it out, he's the best, pretty much what every doctor's office says about their doctors. And I voiced my concerns, about possibly having this thing called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And this doctor pretty much scoffed at me. Who am I to, self-diagnose? You're Googling too much. I'll be the judge of that. And according to him, it was just anxiety. And he said he knew all about POTS, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something to the tune of, you can't have POTS if your blood pressure goes up, or you can't have POTS if your blood pressure goes down. Something completely inaccurate. But luckily, there was a physician's assistant who had overheard this conversation. I went home completely distraught and disheartened. Here I am, have been going through this hell for the last year, waiting for this cardiologist who was going to, answer my prayers. And he pretty much did what every other doctor had done up until that point and dismissed me. Well, this physician's assistant had overheard this conversation and put his neck out on the line and said, you know what? I think this guy's telling the truth. I think there really is something wrong with this guy. I want to take over his case. And of course, this terrible cardiologist had no problem with that, because according to him, I was just, crazy or, stricken with anxiety. This physician's assistant ordered this thing called a tilt table test. And basically what it does is it's a long gurney on like a hydraulic that moves you, up and down and back and forth, and simulates a change in stature, in your orthostatic position. And while doing that, they monitor your vitals. And within about 30 minutes, he stopped the test. There was no question or doubt about it. I had postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So I was given that diagnosis immediately. And from then on, it was just a process of finding a doctor or a team of doctors on a facility that knows how to treat it. Because even at that point, David, I'll never forget his name, he still works at that doctor's office. He said, you know, now you have a diagnosis, but you probably have more to offer us than we have to offer you, meaning that, you know, they can learn more from me than, you know, I can learn from them, because they had no idea. POTS is a very, very tricky thing to treat. For people that don't know what POTS is, it is a syndrome that affects your central nervous system. It's a form of disautonomia or autonomic dysfunction. So basically all your body's involuntary functions are affected. You know, predominantly POTS patients have an increase in heart rate upon upright positions. So basically from sitting to standing or from laying to standing, your heart rate increases exponentially. But it's a syndrome, and with this syndrome comes a multitude of symptoms, and they vary in severity from patient to patient. Unfortunately, I've been clinically disabled for the last 6 years, and along with POTS I have a multitude of other illnesses. And that's another thing too, is that a lot of POTS patients have other illnesses in conjunction with POTS. A lot of people suffer from mast cell activation. A lot of people suffer with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, IBS. Those are all, you know, typically in conjunction with POTS. And so, you know, a lot of people with POTS struggle with all those other illnesses, and unfortunately I am one of those people. So I finally had a diagnosis after, you know, a year of basically being told that I was crazy, that it was all in my head, that it was just, you know, psychosomatic. I finally was validated, all because one physician's assistant, not even a doctor, put himself out there and, you know, truly wanted to help me, not, you know, just wanted to come to work and be a narcissist like 90% of doctors that I've encountered have been. But to anybody out there who feels or thinks they might have a chronic illness or any illness, and they feel that they're not being heard, don't give up. You know, you have to be your own advocate. For every 100 terrible doctors out there, there's probably one good one, and it might take you weeks or months or even years to find that one good one. But the key is to just keep trying, to keep pushing. You know, they say that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and you know, you have to be that. You have to be your own advocate, and you have to keep pushing, because you will get dismissed. Trust me, I've seen hundreds of doctors and specialists in the last 7 years. Hundreds, no exaggeration. You know, some of them have been highly regarded in their field, and they've been wrong. You know, it happens, but you just have to have hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, hopefully it will get easier in time. You know, some days are better than others. But yeah, that's my story of my diagnosis of postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and pretty much my entry into a life of chronic illness. I hope this video was informative and able to help. I have plenty of more stories, and I will be, you know, documenting this, you know, entire journey through life with chronic illness. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to hit that like button, and if you're interested in this, subscribe.